25th anniversary of the Harlem Globetrotters, a traveling basketball team whose players are truly talented, but whose stock and trade has always been vaudeville entertainment with a basketball twist. For a time, the ball club was the only refuge for African Americans who wanted to play pro basketball, and in their early years, they often defeated basketball's best. But by the 60s, the Trotters show had evolved into prearranged victories and slapstick comedy, and the sillier they were, the more popular they became. So for a time, the most popular of all the Globetrotters was their clown prince, Meadowlark Lemon. As Jim Lampley reports, the Globetrotters still exist, Meadowlark Lemon is still around, and together they have a plan that may surprise you.
If you think Dr. J invented this, or Jason Williams was the first to do this, then think again. None of this originated in the NBA. These innovations all came from one team. Remember the Harlem Globetrotters? For a period of time in the 60s and 70s, they were the hottest thing in basketball.
And the razzle-dazzle antics of the Globetrotters helped bring the game its global fame.
And the hottest Globetrotter of all was Meadowlark Lemon.
Meadowlark, you're the only man in history who routinely hit half-court shots night after night after night.
Yeah, and you know, to be able to hit 70% from that area over 38 years, God, you don't see that every day. Can I do it now? I don't know.
Why should it even matter if Meadowlark can still play? After all, he left the Globetrotters 23 years ago. It matters because Meadowlark is talking about a comeback with the Globetrotters. You see, if Meadowlark Lemon can play 16 more games, that will make $10,000 for his career. So you may not have heard the last of him whistling Sweet Georgia Brown. Meadowlark's return at his age would be an achievement in itself, although we're not sure exactly how old Meadowlark is. Ask his age and he'll tell you somewhere between 18 and 100.
Now, Meadowlark, I've done my math, and I know that you're pretty close to 70 years old. Pretty close. Can you play?
I can still run, I can jump, I can shoot, and I'm pretty strong. It'll take a lot of practice today. I mean, that's going out practicing 4 to 6 hours a day.
But if he is to join the Globetrotters, he'll need the green light from this man, Manny Jackson, who briefly played with Meadowlark in the 70s and who has owned the team since 1993.
So you're all for a scenario that has Meadowlark playing 16 more games with your team in a Globetrotter uniform?
We're trying to figure out a way to get this information to the marketplace, that it's a win-win for Meadowlark, for the audiences, and for the future of the Harlem Globetrotters.
If you'd forgotten the Globetrotters were still around, you're not alone. That's Manny Jackson's problem. The team forges ahead, but now on a smaller stage, in the shadows of the NBA and college basketball. So could the return of the Globetrotters' best remembered player revive the Globetrotters' status? Perhaps. At the very least, it would be a fitting end to Meadowlark Lemon's Globetrotter story.
Tell me how you decided you wanted to become a Harlem Globetrotter.
Oh, God, that started back in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Ritz Theater, when I was 11 years old. And when I saw this game, I said, this is it. I don't have to go any farther. This is it.
The Globetrotters were founded by Abe Saperstein in 1926 as a barnstorming team which would take on any competition, anywhere. And they were good. They even beat the NBA champion Lakers 2 years in a row in the late 1940s. And when Meadowlark joined the Globetrotters in 1952, they were routinely performing basketball feats unheard of in the NBA.
I used to watch Clarence Wilson, who, when we started shooting the three-point shot, there were nights he'd make 10 for 10 on a regular basis. Then we brought Curly Neal over later on. He had the best touch of anybody.
But into the 60s, the Globetrotters relied more and more on circus gags and preserved their basketball mystique by routing hand-picked competition. Why the shift to basketball vaudeville? Survival. The integration of the NBA in 1950 meant the Globetrotters could no longer compete for elite black players. Wilt Chamberlain did play for them 1 year in 1958.
The crowd is also interested in the basket dunking of Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain.
But then he departed for NBA riches.
When Wilt left and went to the NBA, it didn't make any of the rest of you feel, hey, we should be where he is?
No, not me. He didn't want to be there either.
So why'd he go?
He wanted to see how good he was.
You didn't want to see how good you were?
With me, it didn't matter. I had my niche. I enjoyed what I did.
And Meadowlark's niche was making people laugh. He even remembers, decades later, fans like the young boy who couldn't stop cracking up.
His uncle was with him. He said, Meadowlark, he's blind, he can't see you. He said, I'm just telling him what you're doing. It don't get any better than that.
Because he was in constant laughter.
I was just sprinkling a little lemon flavor over there, man. It was good.
Meadowlark's connection to fans in the 60s and 70s helped the Trotters explode into a phenomenon. Marketing themselves as a comedic troupe more than a basketball team, the Globetrotters of that era rode a wave of media coverage that put the team, and particularly Meadowlark, among sports' most recognizable faces.
They were the real first dream team.
George Lemon, Meadowlark's son, is the owner and head coach of the Tennessee Thundercats, an Arena League football team in Knoxville. As a child, he sometimes joined the Globetrotters on the road and saw their popularity.
They had the shoe contracts, they had the TV shows, they had the cartoons.
Hey, fellas, Scooby-Doo and his pals. It's our friends, the famous Harlem Globetrotters.
Coming out of a bus or coming out of a locker room and being swarmed by people, you know, it's like they had like the rock star status.
In the mid-70s, with his Globetrotter salary and a hefty endorsement income, Meadowlark was earning more than most NBA stars. But his success took a huge personal toll. Non-stop touring meant that Meadowlark rarely saw his 5 children and his wife back home.
So there's a strain, there's a sadness behind the scenes, right?
Oh, God, that's, I couldn't do it again. To give them the home that I wanted them to have and the finances to get an education. If I couldn't have done it any other way.
He wasn't there. It kept him away. But we knew what he was doing was good for the family. He was working hard, trying to make a living. But emotionally, we missed out on a lot.
By 1975, Meadowlark and his wife had broken up, and the Globetrotters were starting to split up too. Meadowlark's prominence caused dissension among other players.
They say that you behaved arrogantly, that you wanted too much of the show to yourself.
Nobody would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive 200 miles to do the marketing. I did. I was the first to go to practice, the last to leave. Nobody else made that same commitment but me.
But in 1978, Meadowlark left the Globetrotters and started a rival team, the Buccaneers. The Globetrotter management responded with a lawsuit, accusing the Buccaneers of ripping off their routines. Meadowlark won in court, but the Buccaneers folded after only 3 years. He then moved on to Hollywood to become an actor. But that's when a friend introduced him to religion.
She was a born-again Christian, and she began to turn my life around.
When there part of you that said, wait a minute, I'm about to be an actor here.
Yeah.
I'm about to be in the movies.
Yeah.
Don't call me to Christianity, it's inconvenient for me.
Yeah, I said all of that. I said all of that, but that wasn't it, man. And the Lord answered me. Evidently, he's talking to God. Yeah.
Meadowlark left Hollywood behind to become a full-time evangelist. For the past 15 years, he's been traveling the country preaching the gospel. But not many preachers can do this.
With you, a little wraparound pass.
You incorporate some of your old Globetrotter shtick into your preaching.
That's me. That's me. You know, like I have a lot of kids come up to me and they said, I like the way you preach. I said, why? Because I can understand you. And the messages that I preach are very simple. Each minister to come in this church should bless these kids here.
Did becoming a Christian give you a new perspective on family life?
Oh, God, yes, man.
In 1993, Meadowlark married Dr. Cynthia Fairfield. They live in Arizona with their 2 children, Crystal and Caleb.
He's a good friend, he's a wonderful lover, he's a wonderful father, he's everything that I ever dreamed that a husband could be.
Some might wonder how a man who's beyond 60 connects to a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old as a father.
Well, I wondered that myself, but he does very well. He's young at heart. He loves kids, and kids respond to Meadowlark.
You are going to class, okay?
Do you think Meadowlark sees this family as a second chance?
I think so, yes.
We don't do anything without them. If it's a social thing, and my 2 kids can't go with Cynthia and I, we don't go. Babysitters, we don't need babysitters.
Meadowlark, you can never sew back into your first family what you left out.
I wish I could.
There was a time in our lives we didn't know if he cared, if it mattered. But now I know his heart and I know what he stands for. And I know that basketball isn't his God anymore.
The question now is whether he can also reconcile with the Globetrotter family after their nasty split more than 20 years ago. More to the point, can he patch it up in time to get to his 10,000th game while he's still able?
I think we're still very much in that healing process.
The healing process could culminate in Meadowlark touring with the Globetrotters for his remaining games. But Meadowlark will only do this with the Globetrotters if they see it the way he does.
I believe that we could have one of the greatest tours that ever been put together. And you know, you already said I'm 70 years old, man. Time is running out. Let's get this thing over with. Let's get it done so I can go on with things.
Lamps, we're not going to give our ages away here, but when's the first time you saw the Trotters?
1961, Miami Beach Convention Center, and Meadowlark was the star of the show. And you know, Bryant, Bill Russell and Casey Jones and Sam Jones were winning championships in the NBA with the Celtics, and you could see where the whole thing was headed socially. But it was a great show and an unforgettable childhood memory.
Yeah, the sensitivity of the times also played a part in the Trotters' demise too, right? That it became wrong to laugh at the antics of what was a step-and-fetch-it act on the floor.
Well, I would think certainly for African Americans. I mean, I think the whole thing reached a point where it smacked too obviously of black entertainers entertaining largely white audiences with a show that was definitely an anachronism. It harkened back to an older time. But I asked Meadowlark about his own sensitivity about that, and he said, hey, we created so much goodwill. Why argue about how we did it? Good is good. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Can Meadowlark still play? I mean, I know you showed the clips of him making a hook shot and a couple of the other things. Can he still play?
I think he could get through the kinds of antics that they put forth during a game for a significant enough number of minutes to make the 16 games on the floor entertaining enough. Could he play like play? I mean, he's almost 70 years old, but he's in pretty doggone good shape for somebody who's almost 70.
If they do it, when's the timetable for doing it?
They would like to do it, obviously, sooner rather than later. And I think the ongoing discussion is exactly how to make it something other than a circus that demeans both Meadowlark and the Globetrotters. I think you'll see it sometime within the next year and a half.
All right, we'll be watching. Lamps, thanks.
I'm excited.
A couple of weeks into this